Hello guys, it's me DJ and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be doing my review of Little House on the Prairie Season 2. I just recently joined a lot of Little House on the Prairie groups. I hope you like my shirt. It says I'd rather be watching Little House on the Prairie. It's a very rainy and muggy day today, so it seems appropriate that I will be watching that later. But I tell you, my life has been consumed by Little House on the Prairie. I recently joined some Facebook groups, and I posted my review in a Facebook group of Little House on the Prairie fans, and they loved it. They just could not stop talking about how good it was, and the views on it have basically skyrocketed. I mean, it's been really good. Also, I've been on Allison Ermgrim's, I hope I said that right, I was saying it wrong before, Facebook page, and she's been reading the Little House on the Prairie books ever since the pandemic began in March. So I'm getting caught up, and I'm on Farmer Boy, this right here, and right now, Omonzo himself, aka Dean Butler, who played Omonzo later on in the show, is reading Farmer Boy, and it's been fascinating the things that I have been learning about it. And I have also been reading Melissa Gilbert's book, which is also been a fascinating read. I've read Allison's book, and I'm reading Melissa's currently right now. I can honestly say that from their two books alone, they say that Melissa Sue Anderson, who played the role of Mary, was the troublemaker on set, as she was unapproachable, she was very disciplined, didn't have time to socialize, and that sort of thing. I unfortunately cannot find her book. It's not at my local library. It's $40 on Amazon, which I don't understand why. It's not on Thrift Books, so I guess I can keep looking to try to find it, but apparently it's a rare and hard to find book. So, just sort of wanted to touch base on that. Now, without further ado, let's get on to the review. According to multiple sources, on the trivia on IMDb, Little House on the Prairie almost got canceled in its second season. But luckily it wasn't, and I tried to find out exactly why, and I can't find any reason, why the show, I mean, there are some episodes that people might not have liked, and might not have wanted to tune in for. But season 2, coffee. Love coffee. Anyway, season 2 is not as problematic as season 1. There's not a lot of character introductions of characters we never see again. Actually, season 2 establishes a lot of what's going to happen in season 2. Like, for instance, Mr. Edwards gets a family in season 2. But more on that a little bit later. And there's a lot of things that are established in season 2 that continue in season 3. That if you haven't seen any episodes of season 2, then, you're constantly wondering, well, where did that person come from, and da-da-da. Because there's a lot of things established in season 2. Now, the show starts off on a somber note. It starts off with the richest man in Walnut Grove, which everyone, Little House on the Prairie fans often confuse this episode with the episode at the end of the rainbow. And before I get into both episodes, I have to talk about Ebenezer Spray. Ebenezer Spray introduces the banker in town. Charles and Mr. Hanson build the bank, and uh, we get introduced to the evil Mr. Spray. Um, and continuity is not very good because in some shots we can see the bank, other times we don't see it. It's only there when it's plot convenient. And it brings up a whole strew of questions, like for instance, where have they been putting their money thus far? You know, there wasn't a bank before, but suddenly now there is. So it's like, where has their money been going this whole entire time? And second off, you know, well, there is no second off. That's what I've been wondering. You know, where did their money go before? I mean, sure, the Ingalls keep their money on the mantle in a tin box, but you know, where have the Olsons been putting their money? Well, Charles, like, as soon as the guy walks through the door, asks for a loan because he's doing something, I forget what, and Charles has no collateral for a loan. So he tells Charles no, which any banker would do nowadays. But Charles finds this to be rude because, you know, he's not very nice. Caroline tries to invite him over for dinner, and he turns her down because he thinks she's trying to butter him up, so he'll say yes to his wife's loan. To her husband's loan. Mrs. Olson asks him over for dinner, and he turns her down flat as well. Eventually, not knowing each other's identities, Laura and him become friends and start fishing. And they have no idea who the other is because, for some reason, due to plot convenience, they don't tell each other's name. And they just start fishing and talking and being friends and enjoying each other's company and all that wonderful stuff. Well, the school needs new books, and Mr. Spray refuses to give them money for that. And it isn't until one day when Laura is outside playing, and she's been telling everybody about this wonderful friend she has fishing with, and how she's enjoyed his company and how great he is, and on and on and on. When he goes passing by on his buggy, she points him out. And Nellie goes, "That can't be your friend. That's the evil Mr. Spray. He won't give us school books." So Laura has finally figured out who this guy is, and she confronts him. And she tells him who she is, and he goes, "Well, you never told me who you were. I am a banker. Everyone always wants something from me. And you probably want me to approve your father's loan." And Laura's like, "No, as a matter of fact, the only thing I wanted from you was friendship and someone to fish with. And you're a mean old man, and I don't want to talk to you anymore." His heart grew 3 sizes that day. Because Laura was able to soften his heart, he gives the books to the school and is a little bit more nicer. We see him again in the episode At the End of the Rainbow, which is what a lot of Little House on the Prairie fans confuse with The Richest Man in Walnut Grove. The Richest Man in Walnut Grove takes place when season 2 begins. The Ingalls family is struggling financially to pay their bill at the mercantile and to do other things. Unfortunately, Mary decides to quit school and go work for Mrs. Whipple, like she did in Christmas in Plum Creek. And she ends up making a considerable amount of money. It's raining right now. It's raining outside. I have the door open. I love the rain. Anyway, so Laura brings her homework home for her and does the extra chores, and eventually they are able to come up with enough money to pay off their bill at the mercantile and to get squared away and to get the things they need. It's a really heartwarming episode that takes the word rich and basically changes its meaning to, you're not rich if you got a lot of money or any material possessions. You're rich because your family rallies around you and does anything that they can to help you. The reason why End of the Rainbow is often confused with this episode is because Laura finds gold at her fishing hole with her new friend Jonah, who we won't see after this episode. And she's just learned about gold in Miss Beadle's class. And she basically tells, she knows much about it, and they end up, stealing Mrs. Olsen's screen door and getting it out. They think that they're going to be rich beyond belief, which kind of contradicts the richest man in Walnut Grove. But Laura begins having these fantasies where the Ingalls family are dressed all in white, and they're like the richest family in town instead of the Olsens, and the Olsens are now dirt poor. So a lot of people confuse the two episodes, thinking that the richest man in Walnut Grove is about the fool's gold, and vice versa. So it turns out that it's fool's gold, and it's not worth anything. And Laura's worked so hard, and Mr. Spray has to tell her that it's not worth anything, and then he tells Charles about what happened, and he's just so sad that he has to tell them this. And then they put the screen door back and Nellie falls through it, which is so funny. Love that moment. There's a lot of episodes in season 2 that has a common theme. Miss Beadle has the kids do something which ultimately leads to disaster. The first episode is the camp out. She asks the kids to collect leaves, and they can identify what kind of leaves they are in class, and who has the most leaves wins a prize. I don't know if the prize was a dictionary or if it was a ruler or something that people would find completely useless nowadays. But it just so happens that Charles has taken Mary and Laura out on a camp out with Caroline and baby Carrie. And when Nellie hears about this, she tells her parents, and Harriet's like, well, go over there and invite yourself, because the children need the equal opportunity to do it. And this angers Nils, but of course he does it. He goes over and he invites himself, and much to his surprise and Charles, Mrs. Olsen decides to come with them. And Willie ends up picking poison ivy, and Mary and Laura know it's poison ivy, but they don't tell them. And when Nellie and Laura are collecting leaves the next day, they fall into some sort of bushel of trees or whatever and ride the rapids, which on her Facebook channel, or Facebook page, on one of her live videos, Allison, who played Nellie, said that episode was very difficult to film because they had to have close-ups of the girls, but the girls also could not be in the water too much because it was cold and it was hitting them in the face, and it was a difficult episode to film. But I love it. It's one of my favorites of season 2. And it's just really more dramatic and easily resolved than I remember it being, but that's okay. It's still one of my favorite episodes. Another episode is the girls are learning about bugs and have to go in a field and chase bugs. Baby Carrie wants to chase butterflies, and when she's chasing a butterfly, she falls down a mine shaft. There's a really dumb subplot in this where Mr. Hanson, who owns Mr. Hanson's Mill and is one of the founding fathers of the town, is mad at a citizen that we never see again, who apparently is responsible somehow for his sister's death, and the guy is an alcoholic, and for some reason, despite all of these men in town, he's the only one that can save Carrie, which makes absolutely no sense. But Carrie, of course, is saved. And there's at one point where Caroline goes up to Miss Beadle and says, "This is all your fault. If it weren't for you, they wouldn't be out there." And it's like, you let her go. That's all I'm saying. So there's one problematic episode that I really didn't like, which was Spring Dance. It was established in season 1 that Caroline set up Mr. Edwards and Grace Snyder, who runs the post office in town, and her husband apparently previously passed away. Well, at first she doesn't want to date Mr. Edwards because he doesn't go to church, but eventually she gets him to go. But in Spring Dance, despite all the character development and things that we've learned thus far up to this point, they act like they haven't been dating. So a spring dance is coming up, and Grace wants Mr. Edwards to take her, but Mr. Edwards doesn't know subtlety. And Laura wants Jason to take her, but he's not getting the hint. So Caroline suggests, with Laura within earshot, to get someone to make Mr. Edwards jealous. So Grace chooses Doc Baker. And Laura decides to apply that to her own situation and uses Willie, which Jonathan Gilbert, who played Willie, is Laura's brother and adopted brother, well, brother in real life. So it was really awkward for them to film that episode, I'm sure. She doesn't talk about it in her book, but I can see in the scenes where he has to kiss her on her forehead and put his arm around her and act like they're a couple must have been really hard for them. And that's the only time that I disagree with Michael Landon's direction on that. But eventually Caroline has to break down and tell the girls that it ended up that she had to ask Charles herself because the plan blew up in her face just as it blows up in Laura and Grace's face. So they go to the dance at the end and all is well. So then we get introduced to the Widow Sanderson in Remember Me Parts 1 and 2, played by Oscar winner Patricia Neal, as a woman who has an unspecified disease that is dying. We get introduced to her children, John Jr., Carl, and Alicia. Alicia is played by future star of Beverly Hills, The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. But I will always remember Kyle Richards as little Lindsay Wallace in the cult classic film Halloween. And she also had a recurring role on ER, so she's had quite the career. So, in the episodes Remember Me, it is established that the Widow Sanderson, whose husband has died off screen years and years prior to this, and they don't live that far from the Ingalls place, but you have to suspend your disbelief just a little bit. She asks the congregation to get her children a home, but she dies before that task can be completed. And in Melissa Gilbert's book, she talks about this episode, and she talks about Patricia Neal in detail. Patricia Neal had been recovering from a stroke when she did this episode. You wouldn't have known it because she's a phenomenal actress. She deserved an Emmy for this episode. But Melissa Gilbert learned to hone her craft a little bit through Patricia Neal, and also learned about strokes through Patricia Neal because her father, around that time, had suffered from a stroke, and unfortunately, he later died after having another stroke around the time of filming season 2, which was really sad for her. And Michael became sort of a replacement father for her, but she always called him Mike. But there's this really beautiful poem in part 1 at the end that goes, "Remember me with smiles and laughter, for that's how I remember you all. If you can only remember me with tears, don't remember me at all." And it's a beautiful, beautiful, poem. And according to Melissa Gilbert, in her book, she says that Michael wrote it. According to the trivia and multiple sources online, Laura wrote it. Laura Ingalls Wilder. So, I don't know. I don't know who wrote it, but it's beautiful. In the second episode, Mr. Edwards and Grace get married and adopt John Jr., Carl, and Alicia. So Mr. Edwards gets a family in season 2, and it's established and continues throughout season 3. And it's nice that he gets a family because not much is historically known about Mr. Edwards. So when he comes back in season 1 in Mr. Edwards' Homecoming and talks about how he lost his wife and daughter to fever, I don't know if that was true because I have not read Little House on the Prairie, the book, in a long time. I'm almost there. But like I said, I am almost done with Farmer Boy. And I'm enjoying, I want to say, that it's just so cool. As I'm reading along with them, it's just so great. And you need to go to Allison's Facebook page and get caught up on her videos. And she's live every day. She's been live every day since March, since the pandemic has gone on. She's just so good. Anyway, let's see. There's another episode that leads to disaster as a result of Miss Beadle. Indirectly, of course. They are learning about trains in school, and Laura and Carl get the idea to go see a train in Mankato with Mr. Edwards and Charles, and they go on part of it, and it gets loose, and it's the Runaway Caboose episode. And like I said in my season 1 review, whenever there is an episode where it looks like something may happen to Laura, that she may die, just remember that she lived to the ripe old age of 90, and she wrote the Little House books, so that's, so just keep telling yourself that. Whenever you're like, oh my god, is she gonna die? No, she's not gonna die. Another episode that I think is really great and heartwarming is Haunted House. There is a man named Mr. Pike who's called a maniac by Mrs. Olson, but he's actually a man that is grieving his wife. He's hoping that she'll come back because she's been gone for several years. Laura is double dog dared by Nellie to go up to the door and touch the door. And she does touch the door, and the door is unlocked, and Jack ends up running in, so she has to go in and chase after him. And that's when she notices the big portrait on the wall of Miss Lily, and Mr. Pike comes back, and Jack goes running out of the house and knocks down a vase, and Laura reveals herself and then ends up running. He goes, "What are you doing in here, child?" And she runs. But Charles makes her go back the next day and apologize and not go back again. Well, she goes back to apologize, and she asks Mr. Pike who's the woman on the wall, and he says, "That's my wife, Miss Lily, but she's not here." And Laura says, well, if she comes back, she's not going to like what she sees. This house is a mess. And Laura starts helping him fix it up and clean it, and they become friends. Eventually, Charles goes to Mankato again to pick up a load for the mercantile or something. I wonder if he gets paid for that. I don't know. But, because he's doing it all the time. But anyway, he goes to Mankato, and Laura decides to look up Miss Lily. She goes into a place and asks about her, and the guy tells her that she unfortunately passed away from some sort of disease. So Laura now, she's supposed to be 9 or 10 years old around this time, has to tell this poor man, Mr. Pike, that the woman he's been waiting for to return home for several years is not returning home. And this is the only time so far throughout the 9 seasons, because I'm only on season 4, where I don't agree with Charles' methods. He literally asks Laura, he says, "Do you want me to go with you because you're telling this man that his wife is dead, so maybe you shouldn't go, or maybe you shouldn't do this," or something to that effect. And I'm like, yes, you should go. And even though the guy is a little mad at her, and when she tells him, he eventually tries to give her this music box he buys at the beginning of the episode that looks like that a doll's in it when you turn it and it dances around, and it reminds him of her. He tries to give it to Laura, but Laura tells him no. And she hugs him and she says, "Don't worry, Mr. Pike, you'll get through this. I'm sure Miss Lily loved you." But we never see him again beyond this episode, and his house, I think, becomes the blind school later on in the show. It also becomes several people's houses before becoming the blind school. Um, there are two episodes that I have gathered that a lot of Little House on the Prairie fans do not like in season 2. One is the big inning, where they play an early form of baseball and they act like this is an annual thing that they do, even though, as far as I know, in season 3, they did not have any baseball game going on. Um, so it was not very well liked. In one of my Facebook groups of Little House on the Prairie, they were like, "Does anyone always skip that upon rewatch because it's boring? There's no plot, it has nothing to do with Laura's story as a whole, and it's just weird." Um, Another episode that a lot of Little House on the Prairie fans, especially on IMDb, criticized immensely was For My Lady. We get introduced to a widow who lives, of course, again in Mr. Pike's old house and later the blind school. I don't remember this widow's name. I didn't try to remember because it doesn't matter. We never see her again beyond this episode. Um, and in this episode, Charles and Mary are coming back from Mankato. They're delivering a shipment of dishes to this woman. And she is getting rid of these other dishes she has, and Mary goes, "Oh my, such pretty dishes. Oh, Ma would love these dishes, Paul. Blah de blah de blah de blah, you know." And Paul said, and she goes, "Well, I'll tell you what. Instead of giving you the money, I'll give you the dishes." And Paul goes, "No, we need the money more than we need the dishes." But then he starts making her a cabinet to display them and starts doing odd jobs around so he can earn the dishes outright for Caroline. Mrs. Olson begins to believe that this widow and Charles is having an affair, and Caroline herself even believes it. But then when it's finally revealed what he has done, she's so happy about this. And Laura says in a voiceover, "And we use the plates every single night from then on." But we never see the plates again, according to the trivia on IMDb. And this person who reviewed it, like, criticized it up one side and down the other. It was like, it's just dishes. Why is Mary acting like it's such a big deal? I mean, it was a kind of strange episode. There's also an episode in season 2 that establishes Mary's blindness in Four Eyes. She has to get glasses because she can't see far away, and the kids make fun of her by calling her Four Eyes. They called me that too, so that name has aged well, I guess. And they also compare her to Miss Beadle. And we get introduced to this guy that Miss Beadle's apparently dating and about to marry, but unfortunately we never see him again either. But Mary breaks her glasses, but eventually gets new ones. And, like the bank, in some episodes she's wearing them, in other episodes she's not. There's another really great episode called Soldier's Return, with the guest star Richard Mulligan, who starred on Soap and Empty Nest, and he's in a dramatic role, and it focuses on he has PTSD from the Civil War and has an addiction to morphine. It's a really great episode, and he's Mrs. Whipple's son. Another great episode is The Talking Machine, where we get introduced to Jason again, played in this episode by Eric Sega from The Poseidon Adventure. So now we have 3 guest stars from Poseidon Adventure: Ernest Borgnine and Red Buttons in season 1, and now Eric Sega in season 2. And he's all grown up in that episode. Looks completely different than that he did in The Poseidon Adventure. And he didn't do much after that. Don't know what happened to him. But he's an inventor, and him and Laura fly kites in that episode, and Nellie gets this talking machine where you can record your voice, and she records Laura confessing her love to Jason. But he basically says that he doesn't care, that he loves her too. It's so beautiful. Another episode that I really love, sorry, my bad, is Continental, where they're celebrating the 100th birthday of the United States, which puts Laura's birthday in the timeline at 10 years old. Um, and they don't want to celebrate in Walnut Grove because they've upped the taxes, raised the taxes. But Charles learns the true meaning of what it means to be an American when he talks to a Russian immigrant who thought he would be able to settle down in Walnut Grove, um, but does not get to because the taxes are raised and he can't afford it. But he talks about how bad Russia was around the 1800s and how freedom is the most important thing. So Charles says that it's a gift to live in America and that we all should be very happy and that he's going to celebrate the birthday of our nation. The season finale of Little House on the Prairie is a little somber, just like the opening episode. A tornado hits the Ingalls farm, and Charles gets decides that they can no longer farm there, which is something that's similar happened in real life. Because, like I said before, they weren't in Walnut Grove for a long time, but that was the main location of the show. So Charles decides they're moving. They're not going to try to farm the land there anymore. It's not worth it, but of course we know that they stay. But it's a really interesting way to end the series, or end the season. So I can understand why viewers were kind of like, wait, where's the happy-go-lucky episodes? And there were some happy-go-lucky episodes. Like the camp out. Like, I love the camp out and Ebenezer Spray and a couple more episodes we have to talk about before I go is The Gift. The Gift is when the girls are given some money to get the Reverend Alden a Bible, but Laura's like, we can get more money if we order this medicine. She ends up dressing up like she's dirt poor and trying to sell this medicine, and she tells this woman, she's like, my mother died and my father's sick and I have to sell this medicine. Whatever you got, I got a cure. And the woman's like, well, if your mother died and your father's sick, and you got the cure for everything, then why is your father sick? And she goes, aren't you one of the Ingalls girls? I just saw your mother. She was perfectly fine. You should be ashamed of yourself. And it's like, yeah, considering the fact that in an episode not that long after or before that, Mom, Caroline, gets an infection on her leg and almost dies and has to cut it off. Which I'd never seen that one from beginning to end, and I didn't know it got to be that point. But overall, I love season 2. It is such a great season, and the episodes are timeless. The performances are timeless, and I love Little House on the Prairie. It just puts me in a good mood and gets me distracted from the pandemic, which is something I need right now. I promise there will be some Murder, She Wrote episodes coming soon on my channel. I hope you enjoyed my review of Little House on the Prairie Season 2. And remember, home is the nicest word there is. Thanks for watching.